Hey everyone, I'm Sam Booth. Welcome to the podcast. On today's show, I'm talking to my good friend Spencer about his experience with different organizations and the theories that relate to it. I also talked to him in length about leadership and who he considers the ideal leader. You aren't going to want to miss it. All right. So I guess talk to me a little bit about the your last job and maybe just like the structure of it. Like what was the structure like?
Yeah, organizationally, it was pretty typical. Like, you had kind of your C-suite or your CEO, and we had a COO and then a CTO, and all three were founders as well. So they kind of were able to place themselves in those positions, and then just kind of went down from there to VPs, which is a startup, so there's only one at the time, VP of sales, and that was kind of the focus of the company at the moment. So it made sense to kind of build out that team. So VP of sales had
So Spencer is clearly describing a structural framework here, defined by hierarchy and reporting. These can be very effective organizations, but at least in Spencer's case, not always the most inspiring. I asked him to compare this to what he has been used to. Let's see what he says.
I think this was unique just because it was a startup. It's really small. Just barely got some funding to bring on these hires. They're kind of following the typical formula, but I would say most of my career kind of followed a different sort of structural frame, which is pretty typical in like the creative or advertising industry, which founders weren't involved necessarily, at least at the places I worked. Leadership kind of came from appointed and put in position creative directors or or business side of things, and then it kind of fell under a creative structure from there. So creative director to an art director or a lead designer, and then different categories kind of fell under that. But as far as feeling the difference, at the places I worked in-house, felt pretty structured, pretty tight as far as kind of down the ladder sort of thing, whereas some of these other creative places have been more, there's leadership, but it felt a little bit more kind of one level, a little bit more collaborative type of environment.
I think without meaning to, Spencer is starting to compare two different organizational frames, structural and human resource. He describes the human resource frame as, quote, putting everyone on the same level, end quote, which I think is interesting. I then show him some images along with labels of the following: a factory, a family, a jungle, and a temple. And I want to know which one makes the most sense to him in a work setting, even though I think I already know its answer.
As far as kind of a cultural or organizational or lack thereof, like I think I feel a little bit more comfortable in a non-competing kind of flat environment where there's not really ways to move up, which is kind of bad, but also I think it kind of levels people's relationships and goals a little bit more.
The audio gets cut off at the end there, but I think you understand where his mind is. For Spencer's personality and his design profession, a non-competitive setting is best. Here Spencer elaborates.
I think a family organization is nice. I've found that having very specific roles in a company or organization is very helpful, because then expectations are kind of the same across the board. Whereas like my last company, one of the issues I kind of felt was that it was my responsibility to bring in revenue, but that is nowhere near any of my skill sets, nor was I expected to do that, or from my perspective. But I don't think they understood what my true value was to bring. So I don't think they understood like my role or my organizational background, and how that could directly help them. But
I started to get Spencer's vibe that his last organization seemed to espouse a Theory X strategy. So telling him what to do and feeling like they needed to check in constantly, treating him like a child. But it seems like his other jobs employed a Theory Y strategy. So giving him more autonomy and making him feel, therefore, more self-fulfilled. I'm also curious if Spencer finds value in any of the other frames in a work setting. Here's Spencer.
But you asked earlier if I felt there's any value in some of these other ones, and organizations as factories. I do feel like it's pretty traditional, and I do feel like there's some value there. Whereas you're set up with a mentor or a manager who, if they're good, they care about you. They can represent you and your needs, and be able to mentor you that way. Whereas maybe some of these other ones, you're kind of left alone or competing.
I'm interested in how Spencer described the political frame here as being, quote, left alone. While the political frame's focus is creating coalitions, Spencer sees it as a competitive, quote, lonely sphere. I'm glad that Spencer did find value in the structural frame by saying, hey, at least you can have someone assigned to you that can hopefully be a good mentor. I then turn to the topic of leadership and what makes a good leader. Here is Spencer again.
Yeah, I think obviously some of those human characteristics we find in just any sort of relationship. Someone, who is kind and aware of others' needs, but besides themselves, and also, I think one area in people's skills in general that's hard to obtain, but just a great listener. I think that solves most problems, maybe, even though there may not be like a direct action that a leader can take, part in. But being able to kind of be a sounding board and listen to those they lead over is always going to be a huge benefit. But another aspect is, I think, just being able to create, I know this is kind of a buzzword, but culture. in that, like, kind of be able to read the room, read the needs of the group, and be able to create a good environment for them.
Spencer hits on two types of leadership that I want to highlight here. The first is servant leadership, which means that you serve to meet the highest priority needs of people. It means developing empathy. It means listening and empowering people by giving them their independence. The second is visionary leadership. Visionary leaders create and maintain a culture rooted in values and principles. They also help people understand their vision and persuade them to follow it. Spencer keeps going.
One thing I'd say too is there's this idea of leadership and what a leader thinks they need to be based on culture or their experience, but I think a great leader also is educating themselves, whether it's looking at studies or going to conferences, but being able to obtain those people skills that help them become a better leader. Because I think oftentimes especially the workplace, like, those that become leaders are kind of the loudest people or the most aggressive, and then we appoint them as leaders out of fear or out of maybe some of the wrong reasons, where great leadership, I think, is rooted in other skills. I listen to this podcast called Work Life with Adam Grant.
Okay.
It's great stuff, but it's all based off of research, and he talks a lot about how if we focus on the individuals in our team rather than like the quota or the goal, the quota and the goal will make up for itself in the end.
Okay.
By finding ways to lift and better your team, and that doesn't always mean to, like, I think make everybody a winner or super positive or be the cool guy in the room, but it's actually addressing human needs. And some of that might be even, like, one place I work, they used to always say, like, if this place isn't a good fit for you, like, come tell us, come talk to us, and we'll help you get to that place. Which I thought was always kind of cool, like, because in the end, they'll help somebody move on, and then hopefully replace them with maybe a better fit, but while still remaining, like, having good relationships later thereon.
Spencer highlights here the very idea of framing, which means to shift your lens of thinking and experience unconsciously to be adaptable. A good leader educates himself well enough to do this. For Spencer, a leader that is about people is the best kind of leader. I have to say, I definitely agree. Finally, we talk about how leaders motivate people. Spencer hits the nail on the head.
One thing that I've been able to reflect on my past gig is I don't think once I was ever asked, like, what do you think, Spencer? Like, you're the expert in this area. What do you think? And so I think with that, it's an empowering technique where you show trust and be able to help kind of build communication lines with individuals, and just asking their opinion on stuff, asking them questions, asking them, to weigh in on what you hired them for, rather than always like giving feedback, or always kind of telling them what to do. Is to reverse that a little bit. And I think that can be really empowering and motivating.
I'll sum up Spencer's thoughts by quoting Jerome Murphy's article entitled "The Unheroic Side of Leadership." Quote, "By relying on staff members, administrators give them a greater sense of efficacy, responsibility, and control." End quote. If leaders share some power and actively seek their employees' perspectives, they will motivate their employees to do great things. I hope this episode was helpful for any aspiring leaders or people that are just looking for the right gig. Again, I'm Sam Booth. Thanks for listening.